And welcome to Deep Geek Live. Yes, if you are watching this rather than just listening to it, I have a green screen. This is very exciting. Today, this is a live stream all about the Age of Heroes in the world of Ice and Fire. This is something I'll get into the detail of what this is in just a moment in terms of the timing. I'll do as I try to always do, frame this around questions I get from my patrons, as well as picking up as much as I possibly can from the chat as we are going through. The thing that I normally try to do at the beginning of each week is just to give you a quick rundown of a few things that have been happening in terms of TV shows and films that are coming out. It's been quite a quiet week, it has to be said, but if you haven't spotted it, the trailer for The Matrix 4, which you may not have even known that was going to happen, Matrix 4, Matrix Resurrections, that dropped just earlier today. You should be able to, I haven't actually tweeted it out or anything, I normally do that, but you should be able to find it easily enough. It looks pretty good, first cut. It looks like they've captured a lot of the stylistic feel of the earlier Matrix movies, so fingers crossed for that. The other thing I wanted to say was that because I often get asked about what's the photo behind me, or what's the picture behind me on the wall, and I often say, oh, it's too far away, so I know you can't see it properly. And now I've got the green screen thing here. So I thought what I would do was just very quickly show you, as I took it off the wall, and I shall show you this is what it is. It was, and you won't be seeing it again for a while because I've got the green screen up, but a wonderful Westworld collection of pictures by the amazing Vanessa Cole, and I would highly recommend that you go and check it out. If you're watching live, maybe one of the moderators could drop a link to Vanessa's work in the chat. So that's what that was. She does not just Westworld, she also does a whole load of Game of Thrones stuff. She's an amazing artist doing pencil drawings, and she does other stuff as well, but pencil drawings, and she really captures people's eyes, which is very rare talent. So I'd highly recommend that you do go and check that out. Lyle Hack, oh, thank you so much. Very generous super chat. Thank you very much. Saying no questions this week. I'm saving those for the Lord of the Rings live stream next week, which I will have plenty. This is just a thank you for all the amazing content you provide, and you've even got me to try Westworld 2 episodes in, and I love it. So thank you. You're very welcome. I'm glad you're enjoying Westworld. They are making Westworld season 4 as we speak, so I'm not too sure when that'll come out. They generally keep that quite quiet, but I'm expecting maybe summer next year, something along those lines. They managed to do the turnaround for season 3 relatively quickly, so yeah, hopefully maybe summer next year for season 4. If you've not watched Westworld, this is something I tend to only cover it when it's on, but it's something that I do really enjoy. Season 1 was some of the finest TV I've seen, I have to say. Season 2 was excellent. Season 3, not quite up to the same standard, but certainly very worth a watch. So fingers crossed that season 4 keeps up the standard. So I'm really pleased you managed to do that. I've also, if you want a random recommendation, I've just started watching Castlevania, which so far is excellent. Roman Lakovets, thank you so much, saying it seems that George R. R. Martin has been out of his cabin for a while now, but we still have no word on wins. I'm heartbroken. Yes. So, I mean, I try not to overinterpret too much George R. R. Martin's movements, but it's hard not to. For those who do not know, he went up into his cabin in the mountains, which is where he was focusing in on writing, and he was there all through. I mean, it coincidentally happened through coronavirus and lockdown and everything like that, so he probably wasn't going to be going many places anyway, but he had complete isolation up there, and he has now descended. I don't know where he is at the moment, but he has sort of come down for periods of time now. The mood music has changed slightly. I don't want to overinterpret it, but every day we're closer to getting it. That's all I'm willing to say. His writing process, just to finish off that, it seems to be that he will go through all of the writing process and then do a final sweat through, just going through the details of it before sending it off to his editors, and then they'll probably have a few other extra changes. They might spot a few things that he didn't. So there is a process. Once he's finished doing the writing of it, there's still a process of editing it on the other side. So yeah, those are the kinds of signs you need to be looking out for if you are a keen watcher of George R. R. Martin. Let's get into thinking about the Age of Heroes. The Age of Heroes, this is following on from what we were talking about with the Dawn Age. Now, what I mean by that is that this is a categorization that the Maesters came up with. It is very much focused in on Westeros rather than wider Planetos, and it's their way of sort of dividing up the time with it's not a very exact sort of rule, but just sort of they can have chunks of time when they can describe as different things are happening. The Dawn Age we talked about was from the arrival of the first men into Westeros all the way up to the Pact, when humans, the first men, and the Children of the Forest, they called a ceasefire. Through the Dawn Age was effectively one long war between the first men and the Children of the Forest, and the ceasefire, the Pact, called an end to that age and brought us into the Age of Heroes. When was that? It's hard to say. It might be 10,000 years ago. The Age of Heroes starts then at the Pact and goes on until the coming of the Andals. The Andal invasion, as we'll look at in a couple of weeks' time, was a long and slow one. So taking place over hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, slowly moving into Westeros. So there's no exact point to say that was the end, in the same way that we can say this is the beginning of the Age of Heroes with the Pact. And so Mara Lee asked the introductory question, how long was the Age of Heroes? And the simple answer is we do not know. It lasted thousands of years. The Andal invasion, depending on where you read about it, depending on which maester you listen to, that was 6,000, 4,000, maybe 8,000 years ago. So we're looking at minimum a couple of thousand years for the Age of Heroes. And Mara Lee sort of follows up by saying, it's said that this was a time that many ancient traditions and legacies forged by the first men were established with influences from the children. What were some of the most important ones that still influence how people live and carry out their day-to-day lives in the present story? And this, I think, is the heart of what we have with the Age of Heroes, because this is the foundation stories. This is the creation of what we have as modern Westeros. Yes, things happen, big and important things, the Andal invasion, the Targaryen invasion, they're all still far in the future. But what we have here are the foundations of some of the great houses which will dominate Westeros for the next several thousand years. House Stark, House Lannister, House Durrandon, House Gardner. Some of the big houses were formed around this time, often based around a key semi-mythical figure who is the founding father of that house. So the key houses are established. Some of the key structures and places are established. The wall is built. Winterfell is constructed. The High Tower, Storm's End, these ancient structures are all established. And also some of the orders, some of the structures of how the system works are established. The Night's Watch appears to have started around this time as well. The Maesters started around this time. So we have the building blocks for the civilization that we see when we get to A Song of Ice and Fire. And through this period, we have those things solidifying themselves. There's the big problem in the middle at some point. Again, we don't know exact timings of the long night, but apart from that, the picture is of how Stark slowly taking control over the north. You get the Lannisters becoming in charge of the whole area. The Westerlands, we get the civilization of the Ironborn establishing itself. All of these great civilizations and houses and structures are setting themselves in place. Lots is lost, but that's lost in the mists of time. Things that we only know the names of vaguely, like the Walk Kings or the Barrow Kings, they're gone and disappeared. It's sometimes described as a time of peace. That's not 100% accurate. It's a time of peace between humans and the children of the forest. The Dawn Age was this long drawn out conflict between them, between the first men and the children of the forest. Here, the pact seems to hold, the agreement seems to hold going through the Age of Heroes, but the first men turn on each other. Kingdoms are set up. It's a time of hundreds, thousands of petty kingdoms, lots of small wars and battles all over the place. So that's what we have in the Age of Heroes. We have an age where things are being created and established. The modern world, so to speak, we can start to see it take shape. In the middle, at some point, we get this huge cataclysmic event, the Long Night. But other than that, things are moving along into the point where suddenly you get the big shift, which is the coming of the Andals at the end of it. And that is the big shift because the pact, which was this key event in Westeros, the pact was between the first men and the children of the forest, not the Andals and the children of the forest. And so suddenly this kind of peace which had lasted between humans and the children of the forest all through the Age of Heroes, that is broken down because the Andals arrive and the Andals start chopping down weirwood trees again. So that's the high level that we've got going on here with the Age of Heroes. And we get some great characters that I'm sure we'll dig through quite a few of them as we're going through this. The last thing I wanted to leave you with by way of an introduction is just a quote from George R. R. Martin. Says, "No one can even say for certain if Brandon the Builder ever lived. He is remote. He is as remote from the time of the novels as Noah and Gilgamesh are from our own time." So he says this a lot about the Age of Heroes, about the Dawn Age. These are legends. The stories we have from here, these are legends. We shouldn't just take them as exact word for word what happened. We should take them with a pinch of salt, try to understand the truth behind them, and understand that these are being passed down by oral tradition from one generation to the next generation to the next to the next. It was with the coming of the Andals that we get written records. There are kind of runic inscriptions and things like that which survive, but it's not much that you can actually build anything from. So we've got the result of storytelling, the equivalent of old man, passing down the stories to the next generation, the next old man, and then the next old man, telling the stories, perhaps embellishing them, perhaps taking out the bits they don't like, adding in something else here. The core of the story will remain the same, but the details of it can't necessarily be trusted. Okay, let's go with a question from Howland's little sister, saying, to continue with the thread from last week's discussion and moving forward in the narrative, how did the children of the forest, the weirwoods, and the first men who lived during the Age of Heroes adjust to the new world in which they found themselves? So this is a really interesting one, because I talk about the fact that there was a peace, but the indications we get are that this wasn't just sort of a happy, peaceful coexistence living together. The pact gave the children of the forest the deep old forests. That's what they had. And humans didn't go into them. And so on a day-to-day level, there wasn't much in most of Westeros, there wasn't much actual contact between the First Men and the Children of the Forest. We get stories like the Children of the Forest would leave an annual gift tribute, we're not entirely sure the detail, of dragonglass for the Night's Watch. But we get two stories of prominent people, the Last Hero and Bran the Builder, who went off to hunt for the Children of the Forest, went to try and find them, and they seem to have gone on long journeys to try and do that. That clearly implies that there wasn't a day-to-day level of contact. There wasn't I'll just nip round the corner to talk to this Children of the Forest over here. You have to try and find them. They were keeping themselves to themselves. So how did they get on with it? They reached a peace. They reached a point where they could coexist, but they did not necessarily work with one another on anything approaching a regular basis at all. So that's how they adapted, and they both sort of went back to their old ways. The only big shift is the fact that the First Men, and we thought about this a bit last week, and maybe we'll think about it a bit more this week, the Last Men changed their religion and took on the religion of the Children of the Forest. Now, the only obvious reason for that I can see is that they have seen the power and truth of what the Children of the Forest do. And this isn't just something that the sort of strange alien gods anymore. This is like, wow, we have to get on board with this. So that's the only big shift. And so there was a bit of shared culture. And it's entirely possible that there were some areas where that shared culture did carry on a closer level. We often think about the Crannogmen, for example. There will be some areas where both humans and Children of the Forest lived. Kazigli Bay, interesting point in the chat, saying, what if the whole history of the Age of Heroes is just mostly mythology and none of the major events happened? What are the implications for the current story? I mean, this is fascinating because we, as people who read the books, who love the stories, we tend to place quite a great weight on these ancient stories because we know some of them are true. They're not just little bits of padding and world building from George R.R. Martin. We get the living embodiment of the oral tradition of storytelling. Old Man tells the story about the others, and we're perhaps initially supposed to be quite skeptical, but then our minds will go back to the prologue and go, actually, that's true, that's real. So I think the short answer to this is that we know that some of this, at the very least, some of this is based in fact. The stories are not all made up, but at a slightly higher literary level, what George R.R. Martin definitely does is he uses the stories to start to show echoes in the story that we're reading today. And some of them are very obvious, like Lan the Clever is an obvious past echo of Tyrion. And it may be that Tyrion will get an idea from Lan the Clever, the legend of Lan the Clever. Lan the Clever apparently sort of squeezed his way into Casterly Rock through from underground and got in and took over Casterly Rock that way. Perhaps Tyrion will get that idea to go with the same thing, but we do know that he understands how the sewer system works under Casterly Rock, so maybe he will think, I can go up there. That's what happened on the TV show. I think there's a very good chance that something similar could happen in the books, because this is echoing from history or legend into current day. And again, we get some of them which are explicitly drawn out. Azor Ahai, Azor Ahai Reborn. We're being invited to look to the past to see how that might echo into the future. That doesn't mean that this is just a cut and paste. What happened then is going to happen again now. That's not how George R. R. Martin works. He is more interested in the interaction between the story and what and the belief. What does their belief or thought about it inspire you to do? Does this give you ideas about where to go? Does this make you think that you need to replicate what happened before? How does that drive you as a character? Chaos Ballerina, why did the children's cooperation with the Night's Watch stop? Interesting question. We don't know, again, is the answer. We just know that in the past, we know that they were told that they were involved in the building of the wall. We'll definitely get onto that in a moment. But the help that we're told is that I think it was 100 pieces of dragon glass every year they presented to the Night's Watch. How did that stop? Well, I can only assume that this was the big geopolitical thing of the coming of the Andals. The North may well remember, but across the South there was genocide of the children of the forest by humans, and that, given the fact that this was not just an invasion of a whole new bunch of people coming in, and poor old First Men can't do anything about this. The First Men did intermarry with the Andals, so this was a sort of breaking of the pact by the humans. It's not something we've looked into. It's not something we've ever sort of talked about explicitly. Well, at least, maybe some people have. I've not seen it, but because we don't know the exact terms of the pact, we do not know whether or not the actions of other humans would be construed as being part of breaking the pact or not. But it's certainly the spirit of the pact was broken when the Andals came in. The First Men intermarried south of the wall, south of the neck, of course. First Men intermarried with them, and then they chopped down lots of weirwood trees. That was breaking the spirit of the pact. So at that point, I think that the children of the forest, as well as potentially having had their pact broken, also they were cut right back down to just a very, very small number. Where in Westeros do the children of the forest still exist? North of the wall. We've seen some on the Isle of Faces, maybe. Are there any other places where they might be hiding? Certainly, if they are, then they are hidden so well that the Maesters can confidently say that the children of the forest died out millennia ago. They have not been seen for a very, very long time. So I think, although we're not given the exact timescales, I think the implication is through the Age of Heroes, the pact held, the children helped the Night's Watch. After the coming of the Andals, the number of the children of the forest hugely diminished, and there was probably a break in trust, and at the very least, and after that, their help finished. Joel Faulkner saying, you mentioned children of the forest and First Men living in proximity. Does this mean interbreeding? And therefore explain how those with First Men blood can have the green side? Yes, quite possibly. There are a lot of rumours, as we say, with the Crannog men, that maybe there was some interbreeding there, intermarriage. So this would explain the different physiques of the Crannog men, for example. So yes, that probably does. And so with if that is possible between the two species, which it seems likely, then yes, that's entirely possible that is how the magic of the children of the forest passed into the First Men, because that magic doesn't seem to be in south of the neck, other than some people who have got Blackwood blood or other First Men blood. For example, Bloodraven, his mother was a Blackwood, which is a very prominent First Men family. So actually, we can probably look at that and go, he's part First Men, therefore he can be open to green sight. He can be open to being a green seer and skin changing and all of the other things there. But Andals don't seem to have these powers. So yes, that it certainly is the clear implication of what we're seeing here. Okay, let's go with a question from hang on, no, we've got second part for Halland's little sister. Second part is the Age of Heroes when Bran the Builder sought the aid of the children while raising the wall. I'm struggling to clarify the timeline as to who did what and when it occurred. Bran the Builder is my case in point. And you're also saying, I love listening to the well-told tale, and the Canterville Ghost was absolutely delightful. Well, thank you. For those who don't know, I've got a second channel, also a podcast called The Well-Told Tale, where I narrate classic science fiction and fantasy stories. If you enjoy great fantasy and science fiction stories, then please do check that out. The Canterville Ghost is an Oscar Wilde story. He wrote some fantastic little short stories, and I've done a couple of his. So if you're interested in that, do go and have a look. In terms of Bran the Builder and building the wall, yes, it's not 100% clear. George R. R. Martin is deliberately making it unclear because this aids our understanding of these are not stories that we can just take as the literal truth. This is not even when the Maesters are writing books like the World of Ice and Fire, this is just their interpretation of history. This isn't an absolute objective truth. But what we have been told as a sort of a headline schematic of timelines, what we're looking at is we have in the Dawn Age, we have the long battle between the children and the first men. That is ended by the Pact. Then we enter into this period when everyone's living at peace and happiness with one another. Then we have the Long Night. After the Long Night, we have the building of the wall, and we have the building of the Winterfell and various other things like that. Bran the Builder is credited with the wall, with Winterfell, with Storm's End, and the High Tower, which seems unlikely that he has done all of those things. But it does seem to imply, the fact that those stories can all come down does seem to imply that he was something around the same time period, at least. Maybe he was involved in some or all of them, but he was definitely around that sort of time, or otherwise the story probably wouldn't have included him. So that's the headline. The bit which is, I think, deliberately clouded by George R. R. Martin is the idea about when things like the Night's Watch and the Night's King happened. When did the wall happen? Those exactly when the iteration of those things is a little bit vague. The wall does seem to be post Long Night. The Night's Watch, we're told that during the Long Night, Bran the Builder faced the others with the first members of the Night's Watch. So he seems to have established this order, not Bran the Builder, the last hero, established this order during the Long Night, which, as I say, was in the Age of Heroes. Then we get the Night's King happened. He was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, which seems to imply that's a short-ish period after the establishment of the Night's Watch. But we have a very clear, already a clearly established organization, it would appear, and a wall. So those things don't seem to immediately add up. It does seem to be that the Night's Watch existed before the wall in a looser form. I talked last time about this idea that maybe their vows were, built up during the time of their existence. So we had the early bit of the vow and then the later bit of the vow when they become more established with the wall rather than many walls. Watchers on the walls is what they call themselves to start with. So, creation of the Night's Watch, during the Long Night, building of the wall, then at some point we get the Night's King appearing, and then after that, the Night's Watch and the wall continue as well, though the wall is built up and up and up. It didn't start at the height it is now. It started as a normal height wall. Cloaked One saying, for Jared S, and welcome to your first live stream from the IDG crew. Well, first of all, Cloaked One, thank you very much. I love it when you pick up on other people's questions. Welcome, Jared. What can you tell us about House Reed and the Neck during and recently after the Age of Heroes? Well, if there's anywhere that's mysterious in other than sort of places like the Isle of Faces, the Neck, we get very, very little. We don't have huge amounts of information coming out from it. So what can we say? Well, I've got a question coming up, so I'll answer a bit of this later. I've got a question coming up about the possibility of the Hammer of the Waters affecting this, it being created, the sort of the quagmire being created by this. But we know that there were the Marsh Kings, that these intermarried with the Starks at some point, bent the knee. But we don't have, unlike most other major-ish houses, we don't have the names of any ancient members of not just House Reed, but any of the Cranach men. It's almost as if they just stayed there and kept themselves apart from everyone else, kept themselves as a distinct culture. Their distinct culture, incidentally, does feel more like the old First Men, diluted by influence from the Andals or anything else. They do seem to be a lot more akin to the olden way of doing things. But yeah, in terms of the named characters, we don't have any ancient heroes from the Cranach men. We only actually get the names of 4 Cranach men anywhere, the 4 that we know about, Halland Reed and his wife and his 2 children. Those are the only people from the Neck that we ever get any names for. So it is quiet. There is nothing that we're told. But we do get some intriguing pointers. The one that we've been talking about already is the idea that perhaps there was more intermarrying there with the children. That certainly fits in with, you know, Howland Reed, as we know, and also Jojen have got Greensight. There's a huge connection there with the Children of the Forest. But also we get Moat Cailin. Moat Cailin is fascinating because this is an ancient castle. It's not much now. It's given quite a big build-up in the books, it has to be said. When you're going through Kat's memories as she's coming to it, she's thinking about how and Rob's the same, isn't it? How hundreds of armies have been thrown back when they've been attempting to attack the north. It has fallen into disrepair hugely. There's only 3 towers left. They're all pretty ruined. And it's fair to say, in the story that we see, yes, it's very, very well situated strategically, but it gets captured a couple of times. It will probably be captured at least one more time to come. So it's not as impregnable as the stories go. But it does have this history. There's some black basalt rock there, which it is made from, which is very similar. We're not told all of the details of it because it's not one of the things that is majorly focused on, but it's the black rock is one of the many things that seems quite ancient across all of Planetos. And there is the legend that the Hammer of the Waters was cast from Moat Cailin. This is one of a number of different legends about where it might have been cast from. And there is a tower called the Children's Tower, that apparently it was from the top of there that the Children of the Forest uh, cast it, which leads you to think that, to wonder, the children of the forest were not builders. They were not castle builders. So this was not their castle. They are using it, seems to imply either they had to have got rid of anyone who was in the castle, or they were working with them. And that, to me, seems the most likely possibility, is that they, because of this close connection with the children and the people who were there, is that actually Moat Cailin was, and the Neck as a whole, was this area where the old ways could continue, where the pact could continue. And I think I mentioned the possibility that the language of the oath that the Reed children swore to Bran does seem very, very ancient, and possibly even reminiscent of the pact. Okay, so I hope that was a little bit rambly, but I think we get hints, is the main point I'm trying to make there, but we don't have a huge specific history. In fact, we deliberately do not have a history. Reflective rambling, again, I shall thank you for picking up on question for someone else. This is for Patrick. The AO Age of Heroes homogenized Westerosi culture. The Night's Watch and Maesters are continental organizations. How did this influence hold, especially pre-conquest? Does Essos have any similar networks? So, does Essos have any similar networks? Essos is actually much bigger, and we don't often think about the geography of Essos. I did a live stream a couple of months ago when I was looking at this. You have to kind of see Essos as having two halves. You get the Bone Mountains, which break the continent in two. The stuff on the far side of that, places like Yi Ti, that is completely different to what we have on the western side, where we have empires rising and falling. So that don't control all of the continent, but they control significant chunks of it. So, for example, you had the Giscari Empire, you had the Valyrian Freehold, you have now the Dothraki, which is not an empire, but in terms of the area under their control, massive. So we don't have the same geopolitics that we have in Westeros. So no, there isn't any kind of overarching thing going on there. In terms of in Westeros, though, the continental organizations of the Night's Watch and the Maesters is quite fascinating. The Maesters, as an organization, they came from all that time ago. The fact that they're in every single house does seem to be a lot more recent, particularly in the north. This seems to be a lot more to do with the coming of the Andals, and then the sort of the spreading out of the influence of the Maesters through that, because the Maesters very closely connected in with the home of the faith of the Seven. The Starry Sept, yes, we think about the Great Sept now in King's Landing, but the Starry Sept, the home base of the faith of the Andals, was in Old Town. As for the Night's Watch, this having got established, what's interesting is that I thought perhaps for a while this was just the North and the first men who would do this, send people up to the wall. And that does seem to be mostly them. But other parts of the Seven Kingdoms did the same. I noted with Nymeria, some of the areas she conquered when she was taking over Dorne. Some people from there were sent up to the wall. This was seen as a place you could send people, rather than a sort of a neutral ground, rather than anything else. It wasn't that the realm ruled them. In fact, even in the realm of the Seven Kingdoms, the Night's Watch are separate. They're different. They don't bow to the king. They ask for stuff from the king, absolutely, but they're not there paying homage to the king. They are self-sufficient and deliberately self-sufficient. They've got areas of land to be able to look after themselves. And the short answer is this happened over a long period of time for both the Night's Watch and the Maesters. It happened over a very, very hundreds, thousands of years, slowly establishing networks and connections. Question from Eric saying, wanted to say big thank you for all your wonderful, relaxing content. It helps me go to sleep better than any medicine, even when my anxiety is very high. And only side effect is learning more about Game of Thrones. Well, thank you. I always take it as a compliment when people say that I send them to sleep. I think this is a fantastic service to humanity if I can send people to sleep. So yeah, I'm very pleased with it. If you get over your anxiety, learning more about fictional worlds, then the better. I think I had one. Yeah, so Alison De Silva, in terms of the order of events, did Brandon the Builder raise the wall before uniting the North under Stark, or was it the other way around? It's slightly different to both, I think, is the answer. So Brandon the Builder built the wall and founded House Stark. Now, House Stark, when he founded House Stark, he also built Winterfell, and it's worth noting that building Winterfell is not building the castle. What Winterfell was to start with was the crypts. So when he built Winterfell, he built the crypts and maybe a little tower above the top, but the rest of Winterfell, it's very clear, came later in iterations over hundreds, thousands of years. Now, when he founded House Stark, they didn't, in one person's lifetime, take over the North. This took thousands of years. There was, in fact, a war with the Barrow Kings, based out of Barrowton in the south of the North, that they called it the 1,000-year conflict because it went on for so long. This was a very, very long period of time when the Starks slowly took more and more land, pushed more and more people out from the North, forced more people to bend the knee, took control of more and more places. This was not just Brand Builder taking over the North. In fact, for a long time, the reason why the conflict with the Barrow Kings was so important because they called themselves the Kings of the First Men. And it was the Starks who were the Kings of Winter. And this was a conflict about who was the big boss of the North. And this went on for a very long time. So Kings of the First Men were not always the Starks. When they started, they were not recognized as being above anyone else at all. In their area, yes, but not across the entire North. Prince of Quarkness, the Maesters love records. Do they have any mythical founder or first Archmaester or similar? Any legend or record of how the chain tradition started? The Maesters do love records, and yes, so it started. I'm blank on the exact names. With I think it was Perenor the Twisted. Was this High Tower, and he needed, his father wanted him to be cured, and so he got called into the area around the High Tower, the old town, where he was the wisest and greatest people that he could find across the entire planet. People who'd studied medicine, people who'd studied magic, people who'd studied plants, everything, to find a cure. And that didn't work. But having gathered these people, he then thought, well, they can stay here. And he gifted them some land, basically set up a university, and it worked his way upwards from there. So once you got this hub, then it attracted other people in, and that is their origin story. The chain tradition, I don't think there's a legend, a founding legend. I don't think we've been told a founding legend for the chain story, but it is clearly the idea that you get, the way they structure themselves is you've got the Grand Maester, who's effectively the representative at the court, but within Old Town, within the Citadel itself, the real head honchos are the Archmaesters. Each discipline has somebody who's the head of that discipline, who is the person who is the top, who knows most about that, who's done the most study, and people, they're effectively, they're the professors of their area, and they each have a ring, a mask, and a staff, I think, in this whichever metal it is that represents their thing. And so then they get to decide whether or not you've passed their bit of study, and you get to have your chain in that link. So it's a matter of how you create a way of, when you didn't have lots of people who could read and understand, here's your degree certificate from Old Town. If you've got all these different links, you know that person has passed that module with a credit. That's the way that it works, and it's a way of embedding the power of that Archmaester, as well as going out and showing people who could not read, who did not understand, what a person was an expert in, because they had proof of it. Reflective Rambling, got a message retracted from you. Not sure what's that, but do drop something else in there. I'm glitching, apparently. Apologies for that. Hopefully we're back. Oh, we're back now. Excellent. So apologies for any glitching. Okay, and all it took was a super chat from Reflective Rambling. Excellent. Okay, so let's go to a question from one of my patrons, Lady Dane, saying, is there an overarching narrative to the Age of Heroes? It seems to me that the Dawn Age has one. The children of the forest were threatened by the First Men and took action. The Age of Heroes is much more vague. Unusual men did great things. Their achievements seem much more exaggerated and less coherent. Finally, the story does get started with the Long Night, but how do the heroes interact with this story, if at all? So I've been talking around this quite a bit, but I think that the overarching narrative, such that it is for the Age of Heroes, is foundation stories. That's what the overarching idea here is. It's the establishment of things. So the Age of Heroes, and it's often the way, even in our world, is that things get established by this great founding figure who did these wonderful things, and that story, that narrative, gets passed down generation to generation, and we have this founding figure who does things. This is what George R. R. Martin is doing with the Age of Heroes. Is there an overarching narrative? It is. I think that is it. It's not a getting you from point A to point B. It's here's a whole load of things. I'm not going to tell you in exactly which order all the different things happened, but in this period of time, we have the foundation of the Lannisters, we have the foundation of the Starks, we have the creation of the Wall and the Night's Watch, we have this, we have that, we have all of these other things. That the Age of Heroes is supposed to be the Age of Legends that founds the story that we have, the foundations for the story that we have now. Ariel Winchester, thank you so much, saying, not able to stay, but will watch after class tonight. Just wanted to drop in with some support for my favourite content creator. Well, thank you very much. I hope your class goes well. Taron Morelda, what are your thoughts on the idea of Bran the Builder being not one figure, but a successive list of kings who built these great structures? I do quite like it as an idea. The fact that you get a person who has a number of different things accredited to them does seem to imply that this is the kind of shorthand you might get through history. And there's a magnificent thing over there. Who builds magnificent things and was around at that time? This person, therefore, will ascribe that to them. So that's kind of feels about right. I don't think it matters hugely for the story and in the long run. I do think that it feels very much like you get a sort of a style of something in architecture, art. You might have a sort of a style or movement that is named after a person that you would have. This is a Bran the Builder building. That might mean that Bran the Builder himself built it, or it might mean that it was done by some people who worked with Bran the Builder, or it might mean that it was done by some people a while later who were doing it in the style of Bran the Builder. And when we get down to present day, it's all one and the same. This is a Bran the Builder building, in the same way that this is this particular type of art. Well, I'm trying to think of an example of one named after a person. Can't think of one off the top of my head, but I think you get the feeling. So might this be number of them? Quite possibly. And George R. R. Martin kind of hints at this with Old Nan, talking about all the different brands that kind of merge one into another. And so I think that it's entirely possible that there were a number of people who did the things we ascribe to Bran the Builder. To me, it seems unlikely that he did the High Tower, as well as the Wall, as well as Winterfell, as well as Storm's End. I mean, simply because of the distance it would take to travel to all these different places. And I can certainly believe that the same person did Winterfell and the Wall. The ones down in the south, I'm not as convinced by. But maybe it could be somebody who saw what was done there and then took those skills and applied them elsewhere. The link, you have to say, is that they seem, certainly the Wall, Winterfell, and Storm's End seem to have this kind of magical aura to them. The High Tower does definitely seem magical, but we've not read about there being a sort of a protective thing going on there. That's what Melisandre tells us, that there's sort of magical protections around Storm's End. In the same way, we're told that there's magical protections along the Wall, and in the same way, you go to Winterfell crypts, and it definitely feels as if there's magic going on in there. So that's the sort of the link across that I can see. Perhaps this is a Children of the Forest link rather than a Bran the Builder link, because there are also legends that the Children of the Forest might have built Storm's End. Okay, question from Zakalok. Do you think Bran the Builder is the Bran we see at the end of Bran's visions? He built Winterfell by being sacrificed in front of the weirwood tree. So, and you've got a second part of this question, which I'll come on to in a moment, but I think this is really interesting. I did get up the bit, I'll read it out for anyone who needs reminding of this. This is talking about the visions that our Bran, had in his very last chapter. So we're reading the last thing that we've got of Bran in the story so far. And he's now got his newly awakened weirwood powers, and he goes through the weirwood tree in Winterfell, and he looks out and he sees things, and he very clearly is going back through time. So he's going back and back and back. He sees people, his father, then he sees Benjen and Lyanna, then he goes back, sees people that it's probably Sir Duncan the Tall, keeps on going back in time. And At the end of that, we read this, and small content warning for violent scenes. If you want to skip forward for a minute just to miss that, you're more than welcome. We see that the tree itself was shrinking and growing smaller all the way through. Lots of faces going sort of flashing past him. And then as he watched, a bearded man forced a captive down onto his knees before the heart tree. A white-haired woman stepped towards them through a drift of dark red leaves, a bronze sickle in her hand. "No," said Bran. "No, don't." But they could not hear him, no more than his father had. The woman grabbed the captive by the hair, hooked the sickle around his throat, and slashed. And through the mist of centuries, the broken boy could only watch as the man's feet drummed against the earth. But as his life flowed out from him in a red tide, Brandon Stark could taste the blood. So this is, as I say, it's the last thing we see from Bran. So we don't get any follow-up to this at all. So we're just left with this. And I think this is a wonderful bit of writing from George R. R. Martin because he leaves it so open. It's a question that I've come back to several times, is who this character is. Is he important? Bran's gone back all the way to a young weirwood tree. Does this mean that this is the founding of Winterfell? Possibly. The language is deliberately vague. Bran is there seeing what's happening. Then you get a POV shift, or do you? When we as his life drowned out of him in a red tide, Brandon Stark could taste the blood. Is that our Brandon that we're hearing about? Normally here in this chapter, he's Bran, not Brandon, which seems to imply that it's somebody else. And if it is that other person who is a Brandon, if that is a Brandon Stark, firstly, how do we get to this other POV? Is this our Bran, going into him? Is this a kind of a bit of foreshadowing about Hodor, the idea that he could go into somebody else's body? That's fascinating and frightening to think that maybe that's what we're seeing there. That is how we hear it. Because normally the whole point of POV chapters is that we only see things from one person's perspective, and George R. R. Martin does stick to that. You get some writers, the POV shifts around. We learn about things from different people's perspectives. Here, each chapter is from one person's perspective, but then the very last sentence, it seems to shift. Is that because Bran is shifting into the mind back in history of that person? That seems to be what George R. R. Martin is hinting at here. So that's a sort of an aside, because there's a bigger issue there. I just wanted to flag it. But could this be Brandon the Builder? I like this idea. I've thought about it a few times. I've talked about it a couple of times. If this is going back to the oldest point at which we get the Heart Tree, the Winterfell, Weirwood, looking out at people or things connected with the Starks, because this seems to be what's going on there with Bran seeing these different things, then the earliest point would be the creation of House Stark, which would be Bran the Builder. Now, is this how he built Winterfell? By being a sacrifice? It's entirely possible. It's the point we have to keep on coming back to with Winterfell. I've said it already, but it's so important. Winterfell, when it started, was not the castle. Winterfell as a castle that's a more modern concept. Winterfell is the crypts. And there is magic there. There's absolutely no doubt that there's magic there. There's magic of the children of the forest there. This is underneath the weirwood tree. How did the magic happen? What do we know about what has to happen with magic? Intentionality and sacrifice. There will have had to be a sacrifice. Who sacrificed? A Brandon Stark. Could it have been Bran the Builder himself? Possibly. because the whole point about the Winterfell crypts is that this is a magic which is tied in with House Stark. So you would need some link, one would have thought, to the Starks. Andrew K saying, anyone who has not, please subscribe. Not far off 300,000 subs, which means the return of the IDG hood, cowl, cloak. Yeah, this is something I rather rashly promised a few weeks ago. If I do hit 300,000 subscribers, then when I first started out doing this, then I had on it is a sort of a cowl, there's a proper name for it, a hood, proper medieval hood. I will happily bring that back, probably not for the entire live stream because it is quite weighty and hot, but when we reach 300 as a way of thanking Cloaked One in particular, I think it was, for doing excellent work and picking up questions for other people in the chat, I will do that. So yeah, we're near 284,000, I think, at the moment, so not too far away now. Stephanie Frederick saying, you agreed to it. I did. I'm a man of my word. I will do that. So do not worry. Second question from Zakalok saying, regarding the others, since they have their own culture, it's suggested that they are a very old race. Can we make the parallel between their coming and the coming of the Suranis in the Raymond E. Feist novels? The creation of a gap in space and time which opened a door, and through this door came the others. This might have been accidental after a huge magic event provoked by the children of the forest. Well, I'm delighted to be able to talk about Raymond D. Feist, who is, I would say, a guilty pleasure of mine in terms of fantasy stories, but I don't feel remotely guilty about it. Raymond D. Feist is one of my favorite fantasy authors. Crackingly good stories, great characters. And his Rift War saga, I know we have plenty of contenders for the title of sort of the longest and most epic series. I don't know how many years he was writing that for, but I think he got up to in 30-something full novels in the series, and it was a proper full arc that all rounded out at the end. And the first books in particular are absolutely excellent, and there is one of the key things is that this Rift War, where there was this rift between two different fantasy worlds, one of them a sort of generically Western European type standard fantasy world, and another one a lot more focused on Japanese culture, but again very fantasy-esque. And there's this rift, and the Suranis, the people from the Japanese style fantasy world, come in and invade. And there's some great stories which go off from it. Magician is the first book in the series that I would personally highly recommend. The trilogy, the Servant of the Empire trilogy, which was with Janny Wirtz as the co-writer there. I hugely enjoyed them. But in terms of the question here, is it possible that the others, rather than being created, just came through a rift from somewhere else? Yes, is the short answer to that. This is entirely possible. What I have now started trying to say is talking about the introduction of the others. I think it is still hugely likely that this is the children of the forest who have done this in some way. There has to have been something to have driven the first men to the negotiating table, to push to the first men to be adopting the gods of the children of the forest, something that they saw the power of the children of the forest, which has to be the introduction of the others. Now, where might they have come from? I think the most likely scenario is still the fact that they created them by turning humans into another form of life. That seems the most likely still. But it is possible, as you say, that what they did was they performed some huge bit of magic, ripped open something in space and time, allowing this other culture to come in that they could somehow control to do what they wanted. That is possible. I think it's less likely because of the fact that the others are clearly set up to be this idealized fighting force against humanity. And when I say idealized, as in, if you were facing the humans, what would you want? You would want, and you were the children of the forest, you would want somebody who was stronger than the humans, because you are not. You would want somebody that is immune to human weapons, because you are not. You would want somebody who could somehow use the numbers of the humans against them, because the humans multiply so much quicker than the children of the forest did, which the others do by they kill a human, they raise it, and it fights on their side. And you would also want to make sure that this fighting force you've got working for you, they might be scary and horrible, but they have got fatal weaknesses to the things that you use. Your dragon glass can kill them. So it seems just too close to how you would imagine a perfect anti-human fighting machine would be, for it not, from my thinking anyway, for it not to have been created that way rather than brought in from somewhere else. But it's possible. I like the idea. I don't think, I mean, we've learned so little about the others in the books that there is certainly scope for George R. R. Martin to go down that route. And it does tie in with something that a lot of people say. He naturally is a sci-fi writer as much as, if not more, than he is a pure fantasy writer. And yes, everybody knows about Song of Ice and Fire. That has become way more popular and well known than anything else he's done, but his meat and drink for many, many years was sci-fi rather than fantasy. Cloaked One just saying, thank you, Robert. Cannot wait for 300k. You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to it myself. Actually, I have to dig it out. Britt Logan, oh, thank you, incredibly generous, Britt. Super chat. Thank you very much. Didn't see a question there. If you do have one, drop it in the chat. One of the moderators will pick that up and bring it to my attention. Just having a look to see whether there was a question. I can't see one there. The Catherine Fursith. Let's take a couple of questions from my patrons again. Catherine Fursith saying, hi, Robert. I was reading about the long night in the world of Ice and Fire. The legends of this period are, as you've often said, rich and prolific across the known world. And then I came across something I hadn't noticed before, namely that in the Rhoyne, the legends talk about how Mother Rhoyne's many children came together to sing a secret song that brought back the day. I find this interesting, since the references to songs in relation to the long night are so few, but seem so important. Like Rhaegar saying his son Aegon's song is the Song of Ice and Fire. What, if anything, is the connection between defeating the long night and songs, literally or figuratively, in your opinion? Hang on, have I just had my have I been on mute all this time? I do apologize. I was going off on such a great rant as well. I'm talking about monomyths, and I'm talking about correlation, causation. I'm talking about the way that George R. R. Martin tries to look at the way that different civilizations ascribe the volition to what they do in order to see a connection with a bigger event that's happening. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the Long Night stories, if you look at how different cultures have got different stories for what caused or what ended the Long Night, they ascribe the power to themselves. This is perfectly natural. This is human. We have this through human history as well. It comes down to us now through lucky socks. When your sports team, you think your lucky socks works when your team wins, and then you put your same lucky socks on again because you think it's going to help them. This is still a part of human nature. Obviously, your lucky socks don't make any difference to whether or not the team actually wins, but you like the feel that you have some control over this greater event. That's what George R. R. Martin often does here with this kind of thing, is that people look at this event happened and then that bigger event happened. There must be a line of causality between the two. That's what he's trying to talk to us about. So the reason I went off on that slight digression was because this idea of that, yes, the Rhenish say they all got together and sang this song, and then the Long Night ended. Did they play a part in ending the Long Night? Well, possibly. We don't know, but there's nothing else to suggest that what they were doing there actually had an effect. But the Long Night ended because perhaps of something else that happened by this character we call the last hero, Azor, Ahai, whoever. But they didn't know that was going on in the Royne. They just knew they did this thing and the Long Night ended. So they now think that what they have done has been the thing that ended the Long Night. So, slight digression on that, and apologies for the muted microphone. Got a new microphone, which is part of my long effort to slowly upgrade all the equipment we've got here, provide a better experience for everybody. I've been told that because the microphone picks up so much more, it picks up a lot more of me sipping my water. So I've been trying to pause it when I've been sipping my water, but obviously I didn't figure out how to unpause it. Anyway, lesson learned. The question here, though, is about songs and the link between songs and the Long Night. The songs are clearly important in this story. It is the song of ice and fire, a song of ice and fire. Singing songs, very central to what George R. R. Martin is trying to say. So why? Well, I think it's because he's trying to convey a sort of a feel of this is something which speaks to the heart, not necessarily an objective truth. We're listening to songs, we're listening to stories, we're not listening to an academic textbook. This is where he sort of comes back. Songs also repeat themselves. They come back to choruses a lot of the time, or repeated themes, and that is what he is showing through this song of ice and fire. So thematically, songs are clearly very important. Are they important to the Long Night? Well, yes, you have to say they are at a thematic level. I don't think this is going to be a literal case of there's a big and impressive song which has got the key to absolutely everything. I think if we ever do learn of what the actual Song of Ice and Fire is that Big Al was referring to, then that would be very central to our understanding of what's going on. But this is not, there's not some magic clue, a song. This is him showing us how his theme of the song works not just across the entire narrative, but also in the central theme, the long night. One of the central themes that he's talking about in this story. While we're on the subject of song, so the children of the forest refer to themselves as those who sing the song of the world. I think I might slightly paraphrase that, but that's what they think that they do. So this isn't just a matter of one bit of the story about singing. That yes, you pick out the long night is about singing. The what we had before the Dawn Age was the children singing. When we have Rhaegar, he's talking about the Azor Ahai, with the fire, the Targaryen feel is also about a song. So George R. R. Martin is wanting us to see this song in all these different places. Abby from Ireland saying, have you ever visited the recreations of Crannogs in Ireland? There is a site very near me. I love to think how George R. R. Martin knew so much about Irish history. I haven't actually. No, I'd love to. I'd love to. I do. Ireland's a wonderful place, and obviously not too far away from me. I was just thinking. It's been a couple of years since I was there. I was in Dublin a couple of years ago. But going out beyond to the rest of Ireland, very beautiful. So I don't, no, I haven't been. I will, after this, I'm going to look them up, though. Thank you very much for that. At some point, I will go up to Northern Ireland, and I will do the sort of the tour of the sort of the Game of Thrones stuff. They've still got that kind of thing. I know interest has waned a little bit nowadays, but I will still intending. I didn't manage to do it while the show was actually on. I'm just flicking through the chat, just looking at everybody telling me I was on mute. Thank you all for pointing that one out. I think I'm now caught up in the chat. I will use this as a moment, though, just to say thank you to my patrons. I always frame these sessions around questions from my patrons. It's part of my way of thanking them. I cannot do what I do without the support of my patrons, quite literally. It's the support I get there that frees me up to have the time to be able to do this, to do the research, to start thinking, to buy the equipment, to be honest. So there's a lot that I have to owe my patrons, and so a huge thank you to you if you are a patron. If you would like to support the channel, the best way to do that is via Patreon. There is a link, hopefully, down in the description. Certainly will be after the live stream if I've not put it there. And wherever the live chat is for you, if you're watching live, I'm sure one of the moderators will drop a link in there as well. So patrons, thank you. I do hugely appreciate it. Question from Lyle Hammock saying Martin could also be giving an ode to Tolkien, who has had a great influence on him. Yes, he does. So Tolkien, this is something I've noticed going through rereading The Lord of the Rings, which I do a reasonable amount anyway, but I was rereading it, I think, earlier this year, and the thing which struck me is quite how many songs there are all the way through. Everybody's there bursting out into song all the time. Tolkien loved songs. He saw songs as being vitally important to express emotion within the story of the elves with their longing for Valinor, of remembering the stories of the ancient times, Merry and Pippin singing happy songs, Bilbo devising songs, Aragorn singing songs that remind him of Arwen. Songs mean a lot, and Tolkien's works of songs in there. So yes, I think that's definitely has influenced George R. R. Martin, and he uses songs as we're on the subject of songs, he uses them not just at this meta level that I was talking about a moment ago, but also a lot of the way through the story for specific purposes. We have the Bear in Fair, which is a song which comes up several times, and he is using that to be showing us a little bit about Jaime and Brienne and their relationship. We get the Rains of Castamere. It is a song reminding people about what the Lannisters can be like. It is used effectively as a weapon of war, as a threat. So he shows all the different uses of songs, and he makes great. There are lots of minstrels and professional singers, and their role is pivotal. They often have time of it. Sometimes they deserve it, sometimes they don't. But the minstrels are the people who create the songs and are creating. We talked about the oral tradition of storytelling passing down. This is how stories, this is how are passed around. The Witcher got it perfectly right, season 1, when you get Jaskier, I want to call him Dandelion, in The Witcher, the minstrel who follows Geralt around, toss a coin to your Witcher. He knows that this is about propaganda. The Witcher, Geralt, has a public image problem. The way that can be rectified is through people singing songs, and that is a form of propaganda for the time. Cloaked One, thank you very much for super chat. I didn't see anything attached to that one. Apologies if we seem to be lagging a lot at the moment. I hope that this isn't my new technology being too much for my computer. That would be very disappointing. But thank you for sticking with it. I hope it's not too bad. Let's go with a picture from question from Creative Branches. Saying, hello, Robert. I've always assumed that the neck was subject to a failed version of the Hammer of the Waters by the children. But in your last live stream, the thought crossed my mind that they knew how to perform their magic, but the initiates of their magic, the first men, weren't as knowledgeable. It makes sense to me that the first men killed most of the children and drove them into the forests. The others started to march. The first men tried to use the Hammer of the Waters on the neck of the field. These magic users could have been drowned by their magic, and the survivors could have become the Ironborn. Only after that failure did the first men make a pact with the children on the Isle of Faces. Does this timeline line up with what we know of the Ironborn's origin and the stories from the Age of Heroes? I know they're an old house, but I don't remember hearing about them in the Age of Heroes stories. Okay, so it could, in terms of the timing, the Ironborn we don't have an exact time for because they are separate to the events of most of the rest of Westeros. But we have the Grey King, who's their great sort of founding father. He was around during the Age of Heroes, it would appear. The hints are maybe they arrived a bit before that. I do like this idea of if the Hammer of the Waters did flood the neck, that created the archipelago of islands of the Iron Islands, in the same way that we get the breaking of the Arm of Dawn. So that works for me. I like that. And so the Ironborn are the people who sort of survived being washed up there after the Hammer of the Waters. That fits with their kind of origin stories. That fits with their own creation myths. Absolutely. Your idea that maybe this was humans who did the Hammer of the Waters rather than the Children of the Forest. The first one was the Children of the Forest destroying the Arm of Dawn, this being humans. it certainly fits a few of the facts that we have that seem a bit odd. I already talked about this being a Moat Cailin, which is clearly a human structure rather than a Children of the Forest structure, and it didn't seem to work as well. If we do have these two different uses of this spell, it didn't seem to work as well. And I like the idea that previously the idea was to stop people heading up and north. This time is to stop people heading down and south, and it didn't quite work, but it nearly did. But they needed to get the help from the Children of the Forest. The Children of the Forest could teach them the spells. So I like a lot of the thinking around this. I don't think it quite adds up for me. I think that kind of magic is huge, and it does seem to be the Children of the Forest. There's no hint that this was ever done by humans, so I'm not 100% sure that would work. But I do like the thinking of it, and what I'll do after this is try and map out, because the Ironborn obviously are there all the way through. So when we get to the coming of the Andals, how this might fit in with the idea of the neck and what created it, if anything. Well done, moderators, on getting rid of the random bit of spam going on there. Mara Lee asking, who will be the one-on-ones? This is sort of bringing it forward in the story. Who will be the one-on-ones to help provide more information regarding the others? Will it be Benjen? Will it be Bran? Will it be a combination of both Benjen and Bran? Or will it be someone else different? The Children of the Forest gave the Night's Watch obsidian daggers. Will this be the only way to defeat the others for good, or is there another way? Interesting set of questions. The information we have about, or the information we will have about the others, will have to come from somewhere. Now, on the TV show, the way that we learned where the others came from was through Bran. That makes sense to me. He is the person who can look at anything in time and space in Westeros. We've been told that he can, in the future, he can move even beyond the trees. So he is the person who has got all of this knowledge. If it was the Children of the Forest who are involved in this, then he is with them. So and if they did do this, it probably was magic, probably was in front of a weirwood tree. So Bran can find out. It makes absolute sense that we learn that, through him. The Benjen, I did a video recently about Benjen and the possibility. I was thinking about the possibility that he might still be alive. So yes, probably. People think he died. He probably died, but he may not have done. He almost certainly kept on heading north, and he's been gone for a long time now. If he is alive, he's very probably hunting down to see what is going on. He was looking for, his initial commission was to look at what happened to Waymar Royce. He will have discovered what happened there, and he won't just want to go back and sort of report back there. He will want to carry on. So if he does reappear in this story, he will have a huge amount of extra information. That's a big if. But it won't be on the creation of the others, and it won't be on the sort of the big picture. It will be more about what they're doing now. Question from a Lady Pushkins. A cloaked one saying, Robert, he is alive. I accept no other canon. Yeah, absolutely. So I love the idea that he's still alive. We don't have any evidence one way or the other yet, but do check out my video if you're interested. So Lady Pushkins, do you think it's true that the wall is magical, and who put the magic within it? Well, yes, I think it is magical. We get lots of hints of this dotted around the story. Melisandre says that her magic is more powerful there. We get the legends that there is magic in the foundations of it, and we also get these kind of anecdotal things when Alicent Targaryen tried to fly her dragon north of the wall, and it didn't want to go north of the wall. So there's a lot to suggest that yes, there is magic there. Who put it there? I think it was the Children of the Forest. And the reason I think it was the Children of the Forest is that we're told when Bran the Builder built the wall, then he had the help of the giants. This makes sense. I mean, if you can have the help of the giants when you're building the wall, why not? They're good at the heavy lifting. They can put things up high. Yes. But he then also, we're told, went on a special mission to find the Children of the Forest and get their help as well in making the wall. Why would he go to them? If it was just a physical wall, there would be absolutely no point in going to the Children of the Forest. They don't build things. That's not what they're about. They haven't got the strength. Pardon me. They haven't got any of the attributes for actually doing the hard work of building it. It would appear, as an architect, the kind of person who's good at designing these kinds of things. So what would he need the Children of the Forest for? He would need them for the magical defense. When the wall was first built, it was probably quite high, but it wasn't anywhere near the kind of height that we have at the moment for the wall. It was just a normal-ish wall. Over the centuries, each generation of Night's Watch have added an extra bit, added an extra bit, added an extra bit, which is what leads to it being the height it is now. Even in the story we have at the moment, we hear about them going up there with bags of small stone that they can sort of like scatter across the top of the wall to make sure that they don't slip on it, to be honest. So that is something which is repeated year after year, decade after decade, century after century, millennium after millennium. The thing just keeps on getting bigger. So that's the physical wall. But if we have, at the beginning, we have a magical wall, that also, that makes sense. It's a magical barrier preventing people from coming across, that ends at the water at both ends. And so that is what you would need to have the Children of the Forest for. Let's go with just having a quick look in the chat. I've only got one more question. I've been rattling through the questions today, so I've got one more question from my patrons. So now is a good time to drop some questions in the chat. I'll probably do a bit, even longer than I usually do, picking up questions from the chat. Greet Weirwood saying Benjen will show up late to the party with all the information about the others, and John will look at him and say, "Yeah, we know." Love it. Fred saying, glad to see Robert's channel got through the difficulties of this year, still going strong on a new background. A green screen or a wallpaper not suitable for kids? It is a green screen, and I can do lots of fun things with it. I can change it around. And so, incidentally, what I'm hoping to do, just so you're aware, this is an iterative, ongoing process to try and upgrade what we're doing here. So the live streams that we've got happening, I'm going to keep the format the same. I'm always wanting to be getting questions, answering questions from my patrons, dipping into the chat as much as I possibly can. But I want to be able to start bringing up things, to point at stuff, to be able to explain things in greater detail, maybe having some maps on board, that kind of thing. I love the idea of having like a big map of Westeros and pointing at things. It would work really well for me. So I've got big plans for this going forward. It will take a little while to all roll out, I'm sure, but I'm hoping to upgrade this completely. Quickly flicking through. let's go with a question from Lawnduck20 saying, "Hello, Robert. I hope you and Dan are doing well." We are. Thank you very much. He's been quite good, actually. He didn't go upstairs. He normally does go upstairs, but this time he's just stayed down. I've no idea what he's doing because I've blocked myself off with my green screen. So who knows what he's been up to while I've been here. Lawnduck20 saying, "Hope you and Dan are doing well. My question is on the language the children of the forest speak, the true tongue. It is said that humans can't speak this language, but we hear of Bran the Builder and Cold Hand speaking it. So why are they able to, but seemingly everyone else cannot? Is there something special about these two characters, or is it as simple as neither one is just not teaching the true tongue to anyone else?" Yeah, so the true tongue is quite interesting in the fact that this is not, it doesn't sound like human talk. This, we're told, it sounds like sounds of nature, the babbling of a brook, the wind through the rustling through leaves on the tree. This is what their language sounds like. Now, this is them, and the true tongue, I think, is a fascinating, is showing how this is connected, who they are, how they communicate is connected to Westeros, to nature. It is just a sort of reflection and building on that. Why are we told that humans can't, but we hear of a couple of characters who can? Well, I think it's probably that it's not that humans can't, but mostly it's not taught to humans. Now, if it is indeed like the babbling of a brook or whatever, that's not the kind of noises that the human voice box naturally makes. So I could certainly buy into the idea that this is hard for humans to be learning. And the children of the forest probably don't want to be teaching it to absolutely everybody. If they've got an advantage that they can understand humans and humans can't understand them, great. That's fantastic for them. So we've got a couple of characters. Cold Hands mutters something in it, in what appears to be the true tongue. Bran the Builder, we're told, learnt it when he went off to find the children of the forest. So who are they going to tell? Bran the Builder, I mean, who else is going to go off hunting for the children of the forest? As we've already noted, the children of the forest, through the Age of Heroes, seem to have kept themselves in the background all that time. And Cold Hands, he's north of the wall. He doesn't seem to have many friends, let's put it that way. So no, nobody's really passing this on to other people. Question from Chaos Ballerina. Are there weirwoods in the neck, or did the hammer separate them from the network? We've not been in the neck. We've not been, so because we've not had any POV chapters, we haven't seen that. My take is that probably there is, and the weirwood network certainly seems to come under the neck, and because it gets to the Isle of Faces, where we know that there are weirwood trees, and there are some other ones dotted around south of the neck as well. So they do appear to be still connected in. Are there in the neck? Well, as I say, we've not seen them, but certainly for the weirwood trees to have been connected to have invited Howland Reed, that seems to imply that there must be a weirwood tree somewhere there in the neck. Perhaps not in Greywater Watch itself, because apparently that moves around on the water on an island. It moves around, but maybe there are some bits that are still stable that a weirwood tree could grow on. Cloaked One saying, for Mike Hall, who are the legendary heroes of the Vale? Well, they mostly come with the Andals, to be honest. There are some First Men families still in the Vale. House of Royce is the obvious example. But when we're talking about the Age of Heroes, these are heroes, first men heroes. What we have in the Vale nowadays is mostly an Andal population. The Andals, this was the first place that they landed. This was the first place that sort of gave over to the Andals and adopted the Andal culture and civilization. So any ancient heroes are not there. There are some stories of the Vale from that time of armies throwing themselves against the Bloody Gate. So the Vale did exist, and there were people there, and some of their ancient buildings were around at the time. But what we have is the mountain clans, who seem to be the main survivors of sort of the first men culture within the Vale. So we will talk more about the Vale in 2 weeks' time, because that's when we get the coming of the Andals, and that's when we get the real legends that are still remembered there for them. Caius Ballerina, are there any significant heroes in Essos post Long Night? I mean, it's a good question. What happens then, and this isn't trying to figure out how to word this. The Age of Heroes is an age which the Maesters have placed upon Westeros. So the timescales we have in Essos are not mapped against the same thing, by which I mean that we can try and sort of roughly work out what happened when, but we don't, it's not 100% clear, because the Age of Heroes is not a thing in Essos. So what we have then are the Andal invasion, which was the end of the Age of Heroes, is when they get pushed out by, and this is like a lot of different cultures, it was the same for the Rhoynish, get pushed out by the burgeoning Valyrian freehold. So that marks the end of the Age of Heroes in Westeros and the start of the Valyrian freehold over in Essos. So if you were to sort of map out the period from the Long Night up to the start-ish of the Valyrian freehold, that's the rough time equivalency over in Essos. Now, are there any heroes there? Well, it will vary from culture to culture. There definitely will be the Great Empire of the Dawn sort of gave way to the next Yeti Empire after that, but we have no real legends and histories there. The World of Ice and Fire, yes, it name checks them, but not to any great extent, just a few short pages, to be honest. What we have instead, probably the biggest thing, is the Giscari nation, lockstep legions. These were this was the great empire before Valyria. The sort of Egyptian field ones that are based, that came from Old Geese, and the remnants of that culture can be found in Slavers Bay in places like Meereen. So it's them and their battles that are really those are the big stories of the time. But we don't get, I can't think off the top of my head, any specific named heroes for that. Reflective Rambling, question for C. McBroom, thank you. The main heroes we hear about come from the Starks, Lannisters, and modern Tyrell, Greyjoy, Baratheon. Some are obvious, but can you expand on what those houses will do in the new Long Night? Well, the fact is that the Long Night, as far as the last hero was concerned, which is the Westerosi legend of the Long Night and how it was defeated. This is something picked up by House Stark the rest, we don't get any specific interactions. We don't get what happened with House Lannister during that time. Did that happen after the Long Night when House Lannister was formed? Probably, but it's not entirely sure. The Gardeners certainly seem to survive it. They seem to Garth Greenham, this legendary character. We hear about him both in the Dawn Age and the Age of Heroes, which seems to imply it probably was a little bit earlier, but then his descendants over in the Reach became House Gardener. We don't hear about them having a particular role there. The Baratheons did not appear until much later, so they appeared and came along at the same time as the invasion, the Valyrian invasion by the Targaryen invasion. So they didn't have a particular role. And the Greyjoys, as we saw at the time, they were largely assuming that the Iron Island that existed as such, they were insulated from it, so they don't seem to have particular legends there of it at all. In terms of what they will do in a new Long Night, all of these houses, well, as you say, I think the short answer is it's about individuals, not houses. The George R. R. Martin has put a lot of work and effort into this house is what their stereotype is, and this is what their stereotype is, and that does work its way across a lot of the different characters in these different houses, but it's the individuals within them that matter. I don't think we're going to have House Baratheon doing a thing, because House Baratheon, who is House Baratheon now? Stannis, I guess. But then what about someone like Gendry, who's obviously related in with the Baratheons? What's the House Lannister role going to be in the Long Night? I think Cersei's role is going to be very different from Jaime's role, is going to be very different from Tyrion's role. So I don't think it's a matter of what individual houses do, it's what individual people do. Remember to turn the microphone back on this time. Lots of stuff going on in the lots of spamming today, I noticed. So thank you again, moderators. You're doing an excellent job. I'm just having a quick flick through the chat. I think I've got another question. Brinlin321 saying, "Hi, love your Robert's Rebellion series. Off topic, but how did the Northern Army reach the Battle of the Trident if the Freys were neutral?" Well, you don't. There are two ways across. Basically, if you're coming down the King's Road. If you're wishing to get onto the western side of the river, then you can either cross with the Freys or down at the Ruby Ford, effectively, which is where the Battle of the Trident was. So the implication is that the issue is not the Battle of the Trident, because you could go direct from Winterfell down to the Ruby Ford without crossing the river where the Freys were. But the implication that the issue is actually the earlier, which is the Battle of the Bells, where the Northern Army found themselves in the Riverlands west of the river. The clear implication is that the Northern Army did come and cross over at the Twins. How did they do that? Well, the Freys, Walder Frey wasn't neutral. He was there. His liege lord was the Tullys, Hoster Tully, so he was doing what Hoster Tully wanted. he was known as the late Lord Frey because he arrived late to the battle. So it's not written down anywhere, but the implication of all of this is that what happened was that Ned goes up to the north, gathers his army, heads down south, and there's an agreement that all of the armies are going to be meeting up at River Run. He, with his army, gets to the Twins and then gets let across by Walder Frey, because Walder Frey is there, and Ned will have said, "I'm here, Walder. Hostatali has invited me to come here. You have to let me through." He let him through, because otherwise that would be an open declaration of war against Hostatali. Then the Walder Frey said, "And I'll bring my army down just as soon as I've got it all gathered." And Ned went, "Yeah, or whatever," carried on and did his thing. The Frey army took months and months to assemble, and then arrived just too late. So that seems to have been what happened with them. Yeah, it's an interesting one. But to get from Winterfell to the Ruby Ford, you do not need to cross the river. Cracked One saying, "It's JG's name day today. Wishing you all the very best from the IDG crew. Happy name day. I hope you have a fantastic time." Andrew K saying, "With a vortex event like the Long Night, where houses and heroes likely rose and fell, it makes sense to me that most of the Age of Heroes legends occurred during or after the Long Night, for me, rather than before." Yeah, it does. It makes sense. And the fact is that the way that the Long Night is described is as a near extinction level event for humanity. This was the Long Night. It lasted a generation. The others across the entire continent, only a few hardy heroes surviving. It makes sense that all of these new people like Lamb, Clever, or whoever, this did indeed happen afterwards, as humanity slowly bringing itself back up again, rather than he's established the new house of Lannister and then they almost all die out and then he has to build it back. It makes sense that it was after. The event itself, yes, this makes sense that there are heroes associated with that. And it also makes sense, we were talking about the buildings, it also makes sense that after that, people are reconstructing. If there's this huge cataclysmic event, after that, people are building stuff. And so the time of Bran the Builder, which appears to have been just after the Long Night, is a time of rebuilding. That all works. And so, yes, you might be building Storm's End, the High Tower, and the Wall and Winterfell all at the same time, just after the Long Night. Question from Cloaked One. This is for James T. Kirk. Who are the legendary figures of the Iron Islands? Well, the main one that we get in this period is the guy called the Grey King. And the Grey King is a figure I don't find particularly inspiring, partly because of the description of him, which is that he always wore grey, and then eventually over time even his face became grey and sallow. But he is their founding father, legendary hero king. He's not the one who came up, he may have been, but he's the person who established the rule and way of the Ironborn. He killed the great sea dragon Naga. We get Naga's ribs, those great white rib things, which is on Old Wick, which is now this holy place where they meet and have the King's Moot. He turned that into his great hall. He had fire which was ever burning there. He ruled for 1,007 years, and I'm sure somebody somewhere will be able to say what the symbolism of 1,007 years, because it's a very odd number. And then at the end of it all, he didn't die. He just walked back into the sea. That is the Grey King. And almost all of the Ironborn claim descent from him in some way. So all of the kings, the House Greyjoy, claim descent from him. All of the other sort of the petty kings, effectively, of the Ironborn, all claim descent from him. He is their founding father. Andrew Kay saying Bran the Builder, first Storm King, the Grey King could all be an amalgamation myths with combined histories of similarly named successive monarchs. They could do, yes, reigning for 1,007 years. It's the same with the stories we get over in Yi Ti of the emperors there reigning for thousands of years. Maybe there were ancient magical people. This is George R. R. Martin sort of playing off. If you've ever read the early chapters of the Bible, of Genesis and things like that, and you get the rundown of the this person begat that person, and you get these ages, and so you get the oldest, Methuselah, who I think was 969 years old, and then you have, and his son was this person who lived to 700 and something years old, and his son was so on, lived to slightly less. That's the feel that George R. R. Martin is going for this, and these ancient people. It feels like they're in a different age, a different time. There was more magic, more everything. Should we doubt the fact that there was this one king who lived for 1,007 years? Probably. Which probably should. It makes a whole lot more sense that there was a great figure who seems to reign for a hugely long period of time, and perhaps then started up a dynasty which all kept the same name after them. That makes a lot more sense. But this is a magical world, and we shouldn't necessarily write everything off. George R. R. Martin, he does come back to this quite a few times. When somebody tries to come up with some scientific or rational explanation for stuff, he just says, this is a magical world. Magic stuff happens. James T. Kirk saying any stories of figures like the Grey King interacting with other legendary figures. So the Iron Islanders kept distinct and different. So most of the time it's later on that we get these Iron Islander heroes, as it were, who then start to try and expand out into Westeros itself. So you get Kings of the Isles and Rivers. Was a title that they took because they were in charge of the Isles, the Ironborn, the Iron Islands, and the Riverlands, or some of the Riverlands. That was Harren the Black, for example, who had that title. But generally speaking, the culture and legends of the Iron Islanders meant that they felt that their power and their strength and their culture was about being surrounded by the sea, and when they moved away from it, then they lost that. So the drowned god wouldn't have the power there. So for the most, they actually just stayed where they were. Fred saying, might some of the stories of the Age of Heroes come from the Andals and happened in Essos, but were mingled with stories from the First Men, so people thought it all happened in Westeros? Quite possibly. This is something the Maesters do think about in the World of Ice and Fire. So they get Land the Clever as an example of this, actually, is that in the World of Ice and Fire, we get this sort of thinking, oh, well, maybe, some people say that this was actually an Andal, who, an early Andal who came across, but that doesn't seem likely because this story seems to have been from well before the Andal invasion. So it's possible that some of them are. The things with Land the Clever is that it's entirely possible that this is somebody who comes in and intermarries in some way and changes it over from the Castlys to the Lannisters, which is what the Andals did. The Andals came in, married into old First Men families, often change the name, and then that family would just carry on ruling as it was before. That it was not an invasion that was just about battles. This was an invasion of marriage and alliance as much as anything else. But more about that in 2 weeks' time. Honeywine, what was Azor Ahai's tax policy? Great question. I feel like I need to do a video on that one. Andrew K, the book Night King timing I always questioned. If you slightly tweak the when and a few details, it almost reads like an other creation myth. Yes, so George R. R. Martin is very clear that there is a big difference between the Night King and the Night's King, and he says he prefers his version. So that clearly shows that he thinks that these are two different things. It's not just like one person they just decided to lop off the S at the end. He sees these are two different things. So it's the show created the Night King. Sasuke saying Amanda's other videos are great, but her Ironborn content is above and beyond anyone else's. She definitely mentioned the Grey King. Yeah, so chance to give a shout out to Amanda. The Disputed Lands is her YouTube channel, also known as Crowfood's daughter. She's big on the Ironborn. I've had her on this channel a couple of times talking about the Ironborn, and she does go through not just the history of the Ironborn, but the symbolism of what's going on there. If you are interested in that, I highly recommend that you do go and check out the Disputed Lands. I think I'm largely caught up. Lawrence S. saying most European mythology and language has its roots in prehistorical Indo-European homeland. Romulus and Remus, Hengist and Horsa, Castor and Pollux, the Vedic. So yeah, absolutely. Would agree there. So I think what I will do is use this as an opportunity to suggest that next week, if you are at all interested in the Lord of the Rings, what I'm going to be doing with my live streams is about once a month, they're going to be Lord of the Rings live streams. I've talked to my patrons. One of the benefits of being a $10 plus patron is that you get a chance to influence what I create. Tell me what you want me to make. I asked what would they like me to be doing on Lord of the Rings live streams, and the answer was to go through the history of Middle Earth. What's just at a headline level, what happened when, because we are very aware about the story of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, but the new Amazon TV show, when it comes out in a year's time, that's going to be based in the Second Age, and also much before that. We've had the one screenshot we've had is from well before that. So this is thousands of years before what we know. So I'm going to go through the history of Middle Earth over the course of a few months in those live streams, and just set out what happened and why. And so what we're looking at when we get to the Second Age should be a whole lot clearer in everybody's minds. I'm going to try also, while I do that, to introduce you to a few of the other content creators in the world of Tolkien and Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings. There are lots of excellent content, like with the Song of Ice and Fire, lots of excellent content creators. I don't claim ever to be the sole expert on any of this. There are always people who have got insights that I would highly recommend you go off and listen to them. There are many people who've got different perspectives as well. So I try and push people out, explore as much as you can from excellent other creators. And on the live streams, I'm going to hope that I had Clueless Fangirl on a month or so ago, doing the first Lord of the Rings one, and I'm going to try and add on a few Lord of the Rings creators just to sort of co-host with me, just to introduce you to a few of them as we go through. So that's the plan for the next while. If you want to know about other future live streams, what I'm trying to do now is to map them out a few weeks in advance, so you can look on the YouTube page. You should be able to see what I'm doing for the next few weeks. Okay, I think with that, I will draw this one to a close. If you are watching this back a little bit later, then there will be appearing somewhere here a link to other live streams, and there will be appearing somewhere around here a link to my Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you would like to do that. Okay, thanks everyone, take care, and I shall see you again next time.